think it starts with the client consultation or the brief, from the client. You've got to ask very important questions. First of all, why? Why do you want this? Why is this shirt? Why are you creating this? The demographic, the age, what garments do you prefer? What colorways? What's your budget? What's your brand guidelines look like? Is it for the retail market? Is it for donation? Is it for
staff?
A free gift, staff? What is it for? Yeah.
Well, what if they don't have answers to 90% of those questions? Then how do you keep that project moving forward?
Once again, I would come back with possibly the same question, word the question differently, and then maybe do some research on the company. Who are they? What do they do? Who's their main clientele? And just kind of go about it that way.
Especially for those retail clients, they should put money and investment into that initial design, because that spending $200 or going to 99 Designs or Fiverr and getting a cheap design, it might sell okay, but what if you're missing out on 2-3x sales because that design isn't super strong and it's gonna date itself really quickly? So I think a lot of people, because they're used to free art, the budget thing they might not know, when the reason we, even for our larger clients, we still want to charge design, because we want them to value design, because without a cool design, it could affect sales. And again, it might sell okay, but how can it sell great? And I think that's the problem people get into. They're just coasting, and with these resort wears, it sells well, but push it, innovation. It's like, why couldn't it sell better with a better design, better creativity? I really think that people, especially people that are ordering large volumes, shouldn't settle for just standard design or free artwork, whether it's using their manufacturer to design for them or using a freelancer, and that using a freelancer that knows what they're doing versus a good designer is a whole nother topic that I'm sure we'll talk about, with some of our upcoming guests. But, what would you ask them or help them with if they don't know the retail market, or if they don't have any brand guidelines? How would you use our expertise to guide them?
I would gather information from our past projects and similar clients or similar values to the company, and just compare and see what worked for that client, and trying to make a new design brief for that for that new project, and try to help them by creating almost a vibe or look that will work for them.
I think the problem with a lot of people in our industry, they become order takers. Like, they want the client to do all the work. They're like, you tell me what shirt you want, you tell me what colors you want, you tell me where you want it printed. And for the most part, the people we're dealing with aren't living and breathing merchandise and apparel. While they might be the buyer, they don't know what's behind the veil. They don't necessarily know how it's manufactured and put together. So by basically letting a novice or intermediate skill set level make these decisions, you're ultimately going to hurt yourself, because you're trusting their knowledge. And if they don't even have that experience, they're going to be stuck with inventory and they're not going to come back. And so those questions at the beginning are so important, and it literally can be a 10-minute, 15-minute conversation to set it up for success, to say, all right, how are you retailing this? Are you selling online? Do you have a brick and mortar? How are you using social media to promote your brand? If they're startup, that's one thing. But for us, we don't even work with startup brands anymore for the most part, unless they have X amount of budget and a plan to distribute the merchandise. Because again, by putting our creative, energy into a brand, if they're not doing it right, then we're putting all this information or all this work up front and it's never going to go anywhere. Right. Sometimes you have to take a chance and believe in people, but us being so small, we can't take every project. And so, when brands want to start something and they don't know a budget, they think, all because I make the shirt, I'll sell it. But yeah, you'll sell it to your family and your friends. And then who else is going to buy it? And you can't build a company just off of that. So I think it's very important, if you're a brand, if you're a nonprofit, if you're a corporation, to have those conversations. One, most of the time the client isn't even going to have answers for that. They haven't even thought through that there's this much to t-shirts in merchandise. And by asking them those questions, you're already setting yourself up as the expert. And they're like, oh, I never thought about it this way. Oh, I never thought about using a hang tag to put on my shirts in my brick and mortar to push people to the website. I mean, it's just little tweaks that isn't going to cost you a whole lot more, but it creates this lifetime customer or more faithful customer versus just that one transaction. You're going to have a lot of that, but you want to grow and you want those fans and supporters to keep purchasing because they're the ones that are going to tell their friends about your brand or your company or where you got that from. So after we have all that initial kind of design brief and inspiration or onboarding, I would say, share with our listeners about the ideation process, which for us, it's one of our favorite, but it's the most important, I feel like, for setting up that design for success.
Correct. I'm pretty lucky that we work together because I think we have great communication. We just come up with great ideation sessions where we just study the market. We go through Pinterest and different boards and just kind of brainstorm on different ideas. From all that gathering, we come up with 2 to 3 main concepts that I want to pursue, and the next step will be sketching. I used to be old school, so pen and pencil, or I used to be old school, pencil and paper, but now I have an iPad Pro with Procreate, so I highly recommend.
Game changer.
Game changer for sure.
I mean, just the time. Now, certain techniques would be great with pen and paper, or like Ray Dombrowski from the Vector Lab, he uses pen and he'll print it out and then he'll smudge the edges and he'll rescan it in and change with the filters. Like, you can create some awesome looks from pen and paper or paint and paper, scanning, and then digital. But for the most part, I mean, you're able to create these hand-drawn, hand-painted looking designs straight from your iPad Pro.
Yeah, and then from the sketching, I guess it will be putting together that pitch to the client with my main ideas, our inspiration images, our main concepts, ideas, fonts, layouts, and
yeah, and again, it's still intentional, even though we start in those sketches. It's a lot easier to manipulate sketches and redo sketches versus, hey, look what I designed, and they're like, no, we don't like it, it missed the mark. You've wasted tons of resources. You are giving the customer this rocky experience versus this interactive collaboration. Even if we're making the rules to the game, they feel like a participant, even though you're using your design eye to show them what would work best for their brand.